So let's talk about structure. Structure is really, this comes from 22 years of work with Peter Senior and especially Robert Fritz at MIT. Okay? So this information was started by Jay Forrester and was moved on through other people at MIT and Fritz and Senior. So I've got to really give credit to those people. Okay? But there's three, if we get into the creative process, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about structure, and I want to talk about the creative process. You go through life, I go through life, taking the path of least resistance. Energy, it's all about energy. Energy always goes where it's easiest to go. Energy always goes where it's easiest to go. What nature is seeking is equilibrium. Nature is seeking balance. Okay? We all know when we, so to speak, get out of balance. You know, we're even seeking that balance back for ourselves. So the underlying structures of your life and business determine your path of least resistance. Your underlying structures determine your path. In other words, another way of saying this, it determines your direction. Okay? Structure determines direction. Okay? And the great thing about us, because we own our own practices, or if we own our own practices, we can change the underlying structures. You can change the underlying structures. So if you're looking at what you're getting, and you're not liking what you're getting, you can dip underneath that, and I'll show you that in a minute. You dip underneath that, and there's a pattern there. There's a pattern there. And if you go underneath the pattern, you're always going to see a structure. There's a statement that I read when I was in Toronto on a big billboard. And it said, if you can see the invisible, you can create the impossible. You see, it was really interesting when you looked at that orchestra. Didn't see the invisible. Nobody saw the invisible. Nobody saw the most important person in that whole thing. And you know, that person wasn't even there. But everything about that person was there because that person created all the structure, all the tension, all the dynamics that went with the music that other people were conducting. Is that interesting or not? Okay. So if you don't own your own practice and don't own your own business, you don't have to be the composer. You don't even have to be the conductor, right? All you got to do is go in and work, right? But if you own your own practice and own your own business, you're the composer and you're the conductor and you're playing the violin or the trombone or singing, okay? So the laws of structure, there are laws of structure, okay? All energy follows the path of least resistance because it must. You see the brook or the stream, but what is determining where that water's going? Anybody? Downhill. The riverbed. Yeah, the downhill determines the flow of the water, but if there weren't water in there, the riverbed would be there anyway, wouldn't it? Energy follows the path of least. Gravity created the downhill and created the flow. But it's flowing downhill because it's looking for what? Why is it going downhill? What is nature trying to get? Equilibrium. It's trying to get to a place where there's a still pond. This is nature. If you don't understand, see, one of the things I think, and you're here, you got to listen to what I think, unfortunately. I think that we have so much technology around us that we've forgotten about the principles of nature. I don't think we even think about it anymore. We take so much for granted that we don't understand that the people that designed everything that we use every day were using the principles of nature. Most of them were using the structural laws and they were using the creative process. So I think it's important to understand that whether there's water in that stream or river or not, the riverbed is there. And whenever water flows to it, it's going to go according to that, unless somebody comes in and they do what? And they start digging a trench in another direction, right? I remember one time, I'm sitting there talking to a 55-year-old dentist at the center, 55. Most of them wait that long, okay? And I'm sitting there and he said, and I said, well, how's it go? He said, this is really hard work. I said, oh, okay, so what's hard? He said, well, I said, well, what's hard about it? And he said, I have to dig a whole new trench to where because I'm going in the wrong direction. And I go, he got it. See, it's like the earlier you start, the easier it is, right? The later you start, you got all this stuff in your mind. You run from one management course to another. You run from one place to another. And why do people, I get people and they've been to 5 different management courses and they're still not there. Why? Because they never got into the creative process. They've never found what they wanted. And so that's important for us to talk about that. So let's remember again that the underlying structures of your life and practice determine the path of least resistance. So would it not make sense, just stop here, would it not make sense to decide where I want to go and think about what structures I could put in place that would take me to where I wanted to go? Would that not make complete sense? I mean, you might think this is an oversimplification, but it's not. Because if you're going in the wrong direction, it's very easy to just stop. Remember, we were on that motorcycle trip. How far out of the way did I take us? About 120 miles. We went in and stopped to get something to eat, and I wanted to get some gas, and I said, we're going left. So we went left about 80 miles. We're out there. I said, we should be where we're supposed to be by now. We should be, and we weren't. We were in the middle of nowhere, going through rainstorms, and finally I figured, you know what, maybe we should have turned right. So the problem with that is you have to backtrack, right? You got to go all the way back to where you were, okay? So structure determines behavior, but behavior determines results. So let me ask you a question. Where do you want to work? Do you want to just think about results, 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 results? Do you just want to set goals, 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 and goals? How many of you set goals and didn't make them? How many of you set daily goals for your practice and didn't make them? Are you kidding? Okay. Of course. We all do. Goals don't work. Goals of themselves don't work. You've been ripped off, okay? They don't work, okay? Because if your goals are going against this underlying structure, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to start to move towards them, and then you're going to move back away from them. Mother structure. You can't fool mother structure. Follow me? You move towards. Anybody ever have that feeling they're working toward it and all of a sudden they slip back? Help me with this. It's okay to raise your hand. Am I the only one? Okay. Does anybody ever have the feeling that they're working harder than they should for the results they're getting? Anybody? Okay. Look at the structures. Look at the structures, because the energy always follows the path of least resistance. So you might be trying to go one way, but if the structures are set over here, where are you going to go? You're going to be trying harder and harder to go here, but you're going to get pulled more and more where? Right? The water wants to go where? Where the riverbed is. Okay? So there are 2 fundamental kinds of structures. 2, and only 2. Okay? So this is as simple as it could be. Okay? One kind of structure leads to stagnation, chaos, and disorder. It's called oscillation. Okay? And here's how you set yourself up for this. You set 2 goals, and you put yourself into structural conflict. Right? The guy says to me, I want to make more money, but I want to take 4 months off a year. Okay, that's great. Okay? Those are in absolute conflict with each other. Or how about this? This is one I get. I want to spend more time with my family. Oh, sure you do. Sure you do. Who are you kidding? That's a joke. I want to spend, well, if you really wanted to spend more time with your family, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you create the underlying structures in your practice so you could? Help me with this. Are you there? Yes, no? Yeah. If you really, really wanted something, see, here's how goals rip you off. You think you're supposed to have goals. You think you're supposed to have financial goals because everybody teaches you to have financial goals. Okay? But maybe they aren't what you want, because money of itself isn't a goal. Let me say that again. You're getting ripped off if people are teaching you that. You want money to do something. You want money to buy something. You want money to give you freedom or safety and security. You don't want money for money's sake. Money doesn't know what to do with itself. Every dentist in this room is going to make at least $30 million in their lifetime. At least. And you get to be 55 and 60. We talk to these people every day. They're broke. 67-year-old dentist. calls me on the phone. My 2 sons, I want my sons to come into my practice. I want to make a place for them, okay? So he's 67. He has $2.2 million worth of personal debt and $900,000 worth of assets. 67. And his wife says to me, you know, my husband's getting a little tired. You know, he's kind of a little burnt out. I'm going, man, if I've been carrying that much weight around. So they don't have 1 house on the ocean, they got 2. Okay? So I said, sell some shit. Sell some stuff, you know? And he said, what? And she said, what? And I said, oh, sell some. He said, sell some stuff. Get rid of some stuff. Lighten the what? The what? The load. Okay? But that's not easy to do because lifestyle creep comes up, doesn't it? Help me with this. It's easy to increase our, but it's very difficult. So we put ourselves into oscillation. That's what rocking chairs do. They oscillate. Structural tension is something totally different. Okay? Structural tension leads to advancement. When you know where you are and you know where you want to go and you put the structure in place, you go there. So this was designed to rock. This is only designed to go back and forth, to oscillate. This is designed to go someplace. 2 different structures with 2 different purposes. Okay? The designer, the composer, the architect designs a structure to accomplish what they want. I'm going to tell you a quick story about this. Holly Atkinson wrote a book about this. Holly Atkinson was in my center for 2 years. He was a Deming expert. He studied all the stuff about that we do and how the center works and how it grows and builds practices. Then he went to Chicago with Pete Marwick and Mitchell. And 5 consultants from Pete Marwick and Mitchell went up to Bombardier in Canada. Bombardier was a division of Boeing making helicopters. It was losing $500 million a year. Boeing was subsidizing it. 5 years later, its net profit was $500 million. A $1 billion turnaround in 5 years. And all he did was apply the principles that I'm going to teach you today to that business. Amazing. If you understand structure, you've got a big, big piece of where you can go in your life. So this structure was is designed for what? To hold water, right? So here's the interesting piece. What we see is the events. What we focus on is results. We are results-oriented. We're successful people, so we focus on the result. Most of the time, we don't see the underlying patterns of behavior. What we don't see is the underlying structure, okay? And when you can see the underlying structure and you really begin to understand it, then you realize that the underlying structure does influence the behavior. And if we can influence the behavior, then we can influence the results. Okay? Now this is an unbelievable combination of everything that I've talked about so far. You've got the manager. You've got many technicians. The leader is invisible, but we make it visible. We've got the creative process going here, right, which I'm going to talk about next. Got lots of structure going on here. Okay? It's a great, great image for everything that we've talked about, because everything has an underlying structure. This has an underlying structure. This has a structure. Structure is everywhere. It's in music. It's in math. It's in architecture. It's in everything. Okay? It's in computers. The genius that invented the language of computers is Christopher Alexander. Makes sense to me. He's a resident architect genius of the world today. Makes sense. He understands composing. He understands structure. Right? He understands how to build things. And his big thing is building things that are more alive. So as you think about this and you kind of reflect on this, the question is structure important? But we don't look at things necessarily, and we don't think about those things necessarily when we're observing things, because we don't pay attention to them maybe as much as we should. But if structure is important, then we should put it in here as something we should be aware of, because you can't really live without it.